Welcome to another webinar brought to you by Mentee Educational Services. You are now tuned into crucial conversations for all you disruptors out there. And on this webinar, we have the esteemed pleasure to have one of the heavy hitters in this game, advocate, warrior for equity, all that in a bag of chips. Clap it up for Dr. IJ, y'all. My guy, how we doing, man?
Man, I'm doing good, man. It's lovely to see you this morning.
And I was just thinking the same thing because, we text periodically just checking in, but, we ain't been on a Zoom. We haven't been live and direct in a long time. Brother, how you been?
I'm doing good, man. Hey, it's crazy you say that because last couple Thanksgivings, I would slide through Vacaville, and then y'all would end up at some point through the night sliding through too. And we didn't do that this year, so it's been a little while since we connected.
Hey, and my family, man, we gonna get there eventually.
Eventually,
yeah. Hey, everyone leaving and we coming, so
exactly.
Man, it's definitely great to see you. But hey, listen, I know you got some fire for us today. So before we jump into it, you want to just kind of give an oversight or kick this thing off, right?
Yeah, man. Today I really wanted to talk about my farm and the work that we are doing up in Sacramento, and how we are taking an educational approach to a lot of the work that we're doing is very unconventional. But I've had to put a lot of thought into what we want to do, what we want to create. And I just wanted to share that with y'all today.
And I know some of the viewers are thinking like farm education. Like, what are we talking about? Like, what webinar did I sign up for? So we're going to jump into it. I promise you'll see the connection, all the moves that this phenomenal brother is making. Before we get there, though, let me just say this. Two things. I would like for you to just kind of break down as short as you can, because I know it's a long journey, but just like your journey through education, I think your story is phenomenal. The fact that given all of your challenges, roadblocks throughout your life, that you're in this position. And so I always just think it's great to share stories, because in this realm of education, what we have to understand is that the kids that, and this is why we do the work that we do, that people write off, or put a label on, actually, you could be stopping the next Dr. Ijeoma. You know what I'm saying? So can you just give us just a brief snippet, of your journey, and then we'll get this party started.
Man, if you don't mind, let me just go ahead and
you want to jump into it?
Let me jump in, but
I'm
gonna incorporate that into what I talk about, man.
All right, let's do it.
So I got this new approach to speaking that I want to try out with you all today. I've done in my last few presentations, and so I will try it again today. And that is, I bring a little scripture in before I begin speaking to ground the conversation. Of course, this is not a religious platform, and so I'm not bringing in scripture from the Bible, but I'm bringing in scripture that I think is relevant to education and relevant to the conversation for today. And so I'm coming from the book of Malcolm X, so to speak, today. And I have two quotes that I want to read for you that is going to ground some of the things that I want to talk about. The first quote, Malcolm X says, "Who taught you to hate the color of your skin? Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race you belong to so much so that you don't want to be around each other?" So that's the first quote that I wanted to come to you with. The second quote, much shorter, But is a great quote to piggyback off of that one. And it says, only a fool will let his enemy teach his children. I think when we think about these two quotes, right, the first asking who taught you, and the second one saying, alluding to this enemy, and the enemy being in control of our children's education, it's going to speak a lot to what I talk about today in terms of the farm and what we're trying to do. So just to touch on what you asked about, man, I'm a humble cat from Vallejo, California, raised by a single mother. My mother, when I was about 6, 7 years old, took on the tremendous challenge of opening her home to foster children because she wanted her son to grow up an only child. She wanted to give me an opportunity to experience what sibling love is. And so she invited a whole bunch of children into her home, eventually adopted all of these children, and these children became my siblings. Over the course of my childhood, I had a not the best relationship with my father. He was absent for most of my life, but I had uncles and my grandfather who stood in that gap and filled that role for me. But nevertheless, like many young men do, unfortunately, this world can be very unforgiving for African-American young men, but I found myself making bad choices and the wrong decisions. And so when I had a golden opportunity to play football in the state of Texas and have my college degree paid for, I chose instead to get involved in the dope game. And eventually, you know, got caught, got arrested, caught a case, and found myself back home with felonies to my name, a daughter that was just born, and trying to figure out, like, what do I do from here? For me, education became my savior because it was the only thing that I felt like would be the great equalizer when it came to being able to provide for myself and my family without having to make that choice again of doing things that, or as we say, taking those penitentiary chances, right? And in the process of doing that, I found my calling just in terms of working with young people. And so much of my work has been dedicated to young people who have stories similar to mine, young people who come from the community that I come from, young people who are trying to figure out what does it mean to be Black or brown in America. And so that gets me to kind of where we are today. And so, you know this because I've been working with you for years. I've really dedicated myself to both community work, being active with working with kids in the community space, but also to my scholarly work, you know, doing research and figuring out what's the secret sauce to us being able to connect with kids. And then last year, coming out of the pandemic, I decided to sell my house and buy a farm. Right?
Hey, and you had a dope house too. I was like, what is this dude doing, man?
It is one of the most unbelievable things I could have ever done. I would tell you, you know, one of the things that the pandemic taught me is that when we think about equity and equality, like those things don't exist in a pandemic.
Right.
When we think about the economic disparities, the food disparities, the technology and educational disparities that our families had to deal with, we were disproportionately impacted in ways that nobody will ever understand because all of the resources overnight was taken out of our communities in the name of public health. Like I think folks don't really understand that. It's like my family is already struggling. And then you tell me I can't go to work today because of public health. And then you tell my kids they can't go to school today because of public health. And whatever dysfunction we had in our home that we were able to get a respite from, because we spent 8 to 10 hours outside of that environment every day, getting whatever positivity we were able to get from our teacher, our football coach, our coworker, our pastor, whoever that is, right? Now, all of a sudden we like, oh yeah, all of those resources that kept you in a space of sanity, we're going to strip all that away from you overnight and make you stay within your home, make you stay within that dysfunction, make you try to survive within that dysfunction. And guess what? You realize when you are in that space that the gap is wider than what you thought it was. What I realized as being a community worker, community advocate, was that the gap was wider than what we thought it was. And it made me think about, what are we really doing?
Right.
What am I doing as an educator when like families don't even have healthy food options? They don't have access to that on a regular basis. What am I doing as an educator when students don't even have an opportunity to be in a functional learning environment? When we are looking at children who are stuck in their homes and it's like 3 kids in one room trying to be
on Zoom.
on Zoom with mom and dad in the background and everything else is going on, and you realize, man, we are performing education. We are not teaching kids. Kids are not learning. This is all performative. And it really put me in the mindset of, how can I begin to do something that is not performative? How can I begin to do something that is going to have impact that is immeasurable by current Western standards, right? And so the farm, the opportunity to own the farm came up, and we had a vision of community, but that vision wasn't articulated. I feel like sometimes you can have a vision of something that you are trying to build, but you don't have the blueprint. What we did have is we had pencil and paper. What we did have, we had hammer and nail. We had wood, right? And what we started to do was we just started to just build. Hey man, just dig a hole and put a stick in that hole and let's fill that hole with concrete. And now all of a sudden we have a cornerstone to what we're trying to build. We still don't have the blueprint yet, but we have a cornerstone, right? We made a conscious decision in that moment to not allow ourselves to be stagnant because the vision wasn't fully articulated. But a lack of articulation is not an excuse for a lack of work, a lack of progress, right? So we do what we can, right? If this needs to be swept up, sweep it up. If that needs to be fixed, fix it. If that needs to be tore down, tear it down. And what I realized is the more that we cleaned up, the more that we tore down, the more that we built back up, the more the vision became articulated, because we weren't stagnant. We weren't sitting on our hands. We weren't waiting for a download of this is what you're going to do. And so now we're at a place where we have 3 cornerstones that are guiding what we do on the farm, but more importantly is guiding my approach to education in this moment. And those cornerstones are entrepreneurship, freedom, and community. And I'm going to explain each one of those things here and how they connect to the scripture that I talked about earlier. So first, I'm going to start with entrepreneurship. And the thing that we should take away from entrepreneurship is ownership. You understand this because you are now currently an administrator at a charter school that has taken what? Ownership over our children's education, right?
That's right.
When Malcolm talks about only a fool will let his enemy teach his children, I think we have to break that down a little bit and understand what he is saying. What he is saying is that it is our responsibility as parents, as teachers, educators, youth stakeholders, as community members, to be responsible for the outcomes that our children receive. That's a very different mindset than allowing someone else to be responsible for what happens to your child.
Right.
It hurts my heart when I hear parents say, well, that's what I send my kid to school for. I send them to school so that they can X, Y, and Z. Well, you're allowing someone else to dictate and determine what your child is going to get or be in life. And I'm just at a place where it's like, I'm tired of allowing other people to have control over that. I send my kid to school, but guess what? I'm going to take ownership of my child's education. And on a larger level, I feel like my space right now is I'm going to take ownership over the education of my community, right? My children, our children are not going to just be left in the hands of a system that was never designed to take care of them.
Mm-hmm.
If you go all the way back to segregation and the process of desegregation, there's a picture of Jerry Jones, owner of the Dallas Cowboys, when he was 14 years old. He's standing outside of a school in Arkansas as the white folks at that time are protesting against the desegregation of the school, and you see the Black kids coming into the school. The point that I'm making here is that we should not focus on Jerry Jones in the picture. We should focus on the idea that that system had to be forced to integrate, meaning that it was never designed for integration, meaning that our education was never in mind. It was never a part of the master plan. They never had a process, a plan, an intention for how do we educate the Black and brown man, the Black and brown woman. You forced this integration on us, which means that you forced us to make room and space for you in that environment, but you didn't or you couldn't force us through integration to reevaluate, redefine, re-event what education should be to be inclusive of you. I just got to provide a space for you, a desk for you to sit in. So when they said only a fool, that means that, yeah, it is foolish to allow a system that has told you time and time and time again, we are not here to educate your children, which means that we as a people, as a community, as an individual, have to find ways that we can become entrepreneurs within this space so that we can take ownership back over the education of our children. So when I think about the farm, I don't know if the farm is going to be a hands-on learning space. I don't know if we're going to build a school there eventually. I don't know if we're going to have youth programs there. I know that we got the space. I know that we have the space and the location for young people and families to be able to come and experience education in a new way on our terms. Why? Because we have ownership over something that allows us to dictate what happens within that space. Because when you don't have ownership, then you're allowing someone else to make decisions about what your child or your family or your community is going to experience. That's what makes elite such an elite concept. Why? Because we are going to take ownership over the education of our babies. We are going to de-emphasize the performative processes of education and emphasize the actuality of learning. Why? Because we want our kids, our community to elevate, right? But that only comes through entrepreneurship and ownership. So that's one of the cornerstones of the farm. The second cornerstone is freedom. And I wrote down play, exploration, and development. The freedom to play, the freedom to explore, and the freedom to develop without surveillance. You know how few of our children have the ability to play? We are so quick to raise them up into adults that we have taken away their freedom to just be children.
Right.
Part of being a child is the ability to play, is the ability to explore, is the ability to go through the different developmental stages, right? Without those stages being interrupted by chaos and dysfunction. And so can we as a business, can we as a farm, can we as a intentional freedom space begin to create an environment where when you come within the borderlines of the farm, you can play, explore, and develop untethered? When we think about learning and the freedom to learn, right? The freedom to learn is the ability to go into your classroom and your teacher is giving a mathematics lesson about, regular addition and subtraction, and you be able to raise your hand and ask a question that may or may not have anything to do with the topic at hand, but because you are in the space of exploration, your teacher can then say, we're going to pivot today. Why? Because if I continue with the lesson plan that I have in mind, we're doing the performative process of education. But this young person has asked a question that has not only shown that his attention has been galvanized, but he's galvanized the attention of his entire class, right? And so we're going to now go and explore this and see what learning concepts comes out of this. And would you realize that, like, as we were exploring, we was able to then connect those explorations back to the original lesson that we had in mind. Why? Because now this person has been captivated simply by the freedom to explore within that learning environment, right? When we think about this idea of self-actualization, we got to get away from self-actualization as being a materialistic concept, as being that the only way that you could be successful in life is based on how much education you have, how many certificates you've earned, how much money you make, and then how big your house is and how nice your car is. When you gain that freedom to play, that freedom to explore, that freedom to develop, you also gain the freedom to tap into purpose and passion. I'm an educator, not because I grew up wanting to teach. I'm an educator because I had the freedom to find that this is my purpose and my passion. I actually love the opportunity to get up every day and work for people, work for my community in the capacity as an educator. That is the reason why I breathe, and it is the thing that gives me the most joy, right? But we don't give our kids an opportunity enough to have the freedom to get to that space of self-actualization of, you know what? I know exactly what I want to do and what I want to be when I grow up because I found my purpose and I found my passion. Instead, we gear them towards an understanding of self-actualization that is materialistic, and therefore we remove the freedom to be able to do those things. The other piece of it is like, as folks of color, man, there is rarely a place that we can go in this world where we're not being surveilled. One of my students, she did a dissertation and she looked at Black male students at a typical predominantly white institution. And one of the things that she said that those students said to her is they didn't want their names to be a part of the project. They wanted to use fake names. And the reason why they wanted to use fake names, because they was like, this is the only opportunity we had to be invisible. Because every day we're on this campus, because there's so few of us and because we're such a rare commodity, everybody sees us. Everywhere we go, we're being surveilled. Whether that surveillance is positive or negative, it's just everywhere we go, I can't escape eyeballs. There's a lack of freedom when you are always being surveilled, because it means that you are always ever conscious of your ability to play and explore and develop without putting constraints on your own play, exploration, or development because of fear of how somebody else is going to perceive it. All I want to do is go to the park and run. But I can't go to the park and run because I'm afraid that somebody is going to see me at the park and running and interpret me having fun for me doing something that's insidious. So now somebody is talking to me, whether it be an adult, whether it be a teacher, whether it be law enforcement, about me running in the park when I wasn't doing anything, because the surveillance of me just being a kid and being free has created the type of situation where now somebody thinks I'm doing something wrong, or I'm doing something dangerous, or I'm doing something that is creating a lack of safety for them. But that's creating a lack of safety for me, right? So when I think about the farm, I think about not only do we have a place that we own, but we have a place where we can remove the constraints of surveillance and allow people to freely experience what it means to play, explore, and develop. And then the last one would be community. Community for me is a conscious rejection of Western philosophies which promote the individual above the collective. Thus, when we think about community and we think about the farm and we think about what we're trying to create within that space, from an educational perspective, we are trying to reintroduce ourselves to the concepts of harmony with myself, harmony with others, harmony with nature and my surroundings. When Malcolm X says, "Who taught you to hate the color of your skin?" I'm asking, how can we teach each other to have harmony with the color of our skin? How can we teach each other to have harmony with ourselves? How can we teach each other to have harmony with our own kind, right? How do we teach ourselves, or how do we redefine the concepts of wealth and profit and success and achievement in such a way that is no longer propagating the individual in an unfair way, but it redirects the focus back to the community, to the holistic, to the idea that I am a part of a universe, not separate from the universe, right? And so we've gone and we've taken some of Tara Yosso's concepts. Tara Yosso talks about community cultural wealth, where she identifies aspirational capital, familial capital, social capital, linguistic capital, resistance capital, navigational capital, as all of these different sort of capitals that fit into the wealth of a community, right? And so can estate farms, which is the name of the farm, can it be a space where you gain an abundance of familial capital? Why is that important? Because our communities are becoming bankrupt of familial capital, right? I know you see it in your school every day that the familial capital that should be there for a kid, some kids are running low. Their bank account is low on familial capital. Their bank account is low on aspirational capital. Their bank account is low on resistance capital. Their bank account is low on navigational capital. And we, as a process of trying to create our own educational system, are trying to fill their bank account up so that it becomes overflowing. I'm trying to create a space where a kid can come with their family, and every time they come, they gain interest on that deposit that they put into their account, where they say, and I've had this said to me, "Hey man, my relationship with my daughters has never been better. Ever since we started coming to the farm, as a father, I've gotten closer to my daughters ever since we started coming here." Why? Because it's something about what we're creating in this space that is allowing me to make active deposits. And so we have to really think about, like, okay, well then how do we reaccount for that? So it's no longer about creating a space that capitalizes on the dollars that people have in their pocket, but we're creating a space that capitalizes on making investments into people's lives, right? And so those are the three cornerstones of what we're trying to do. And I just really wanted to kind of, I know I've been talking for a minute, I'm gonna shut up now, but I really just want to kind of start with that, because as you can tell, I'm really, really, really passionate about the farm and what we're doing and how we're trying to reinvent an approach to education that I think is going to really pay dividends in the end.
No, man, that's hot fire, brother. Lava, man. Lava. That's lava. And obviously you and I are on the same page, same accord. And what's really speaking to me right now is that the family aspect, right? And so, being at a site every day, and that's the case of everything that you're speaking of, because I mean, I can't walk down the hallway without getting hugs from the kids, especially the little kids, right? And that really only happens when you know that there is a deficit. So what you're speaking to is right on point. As I'm thinking about our viewers, though, could you just drop you don't have to give us the whole layout, but can you just drop a couple of examples of things that you're doing at estate farms, so they can get a better idea, of what you're speaking to?
Yeah, definitely, man. So we have our open mics, which is something I'm really passionate about because it taps into artistic expression, allowing our youth to come out there, and whether it's rap, poetry, singing, like whatever the case may be, right? Giving them an opportunity to practice their craft and to practice self-expression. We have this year, or in 2023, we will be doing our second annual Black Showcase, which is a showcase of our youth and their talents, right? Where they come out to the farm, and they've been practicing on whatever it is that they've been doing, and they get to, like, whatever your talent is, you get to just put on a showcase for us as the community, and let us know that you're going to be the next great, whatever the case may be. We have our community garden that we are starting in January, where we have an acre of land that we plan on growing various fruit and vegetable crops. We currently have 30 fruit trees on our property, but we're going to be starting the crops on that acre in January. And the goal is that by April, we will have like brown paper bag Sundays once a month, where you bring a brown paper bag, you pay $5, and you fill that bag up with as much produce as you possibly can, and you able to go home, right? The $5 doesn't go towards profit. It just goes to pay for, the process of creating the food, whether it be the equipment, the water, the volunteers that are coming out, right? But we want to give folks an opportunity to say, like, I'm going to the farm, I'm going to cut my own zucchini, I'm going to pull my own potatoes out the ground, I'm going to get my own tomatoes, pick them off the vine, right? Like, just the opportunity, and then giving our youth an opportunity to come and put their hands in the soil, right? Reconnecting them back to Mother Earth by saying, put your hands in the soil, come plant this seed. Let me show you the process of how we grow food, and the importance of growing food, and the importance of creating our own sustainable food system. Of course, in the fall, we did a pumpkin patch, right? That we want to do again next year, but we want to really expand the pumpkin patch to, pumpkin patch, turkey giveaway, Christmas tree giveaway, those types of things, right? So we have a lot of plans that just is going to be able to bring community into that space, a Black-owned farm space that really, like, in those moments that you were there, is going to tap into all the things that I talked about. And so super excited. Definitely, if anybody is listening and wants to participate, we're gonna need volunteers for the farming, right? To farm a whole acre, to create a whole community garden on an acre, that definitely takes time, hands, cooperation, right? But the thing that I've learned is, if you put it in the ground, it will produce, right? And it will produce in abundance. And so if anybody want to come give us a hand, because we really want to be able to create a sustainable food systems for our family. If you go to the store right now, like, inflation has has almost made it impossible, right, to live a healthy organic lifestyle. It's cheaper to buy the ho-hos and knickknacks than it is to buy actual like fresh food. And so if we can provide that for families at low to no cost, man, we want to be able to do that. So those are just a few things that we have planned, and everything that we do, there's an educational component. So an example is we're doing like community drumming the second Sunday of
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was hoping you was going to touch on it.
Yeah, every second Sunday of every month, we have a community drumming circle, right? Now, there are a lot of different things about this drumming circle that I love. One is just the opportunity to be out in the dirt, right? Like off of the concrete, like actually in the dirt, in the elements, in a circle with your people. It almost, I think about the movie Black Panther, when we saw like Wakanda for the first time, and we thought about all the different cultural things that was happening in Wakanda. Well, for me, the drumming circle is our attempt at bringing that cultural aspect, right? Where like we sitting around this circle, you got a fire pits in the middle, so you have the fire component, and we beating the drum while folks is dancing. Like that's getting us back to our indigenous roots, right? Like all of our indigenous roots has some aspect of sitting around in a circle and fire and drumming and dancing, right? But it's also the rites of passage that happens for children. When do you as a child get an opportunity to sit in the circle and drum? Or when do you as a child get to join the dancing of the circle, right? You can literally see the kids, they're running around and they're playing, and you can imagine like if this was a village, 1,000 years ago, like the kids are playing, but they're watching the adults. They're going through an educational experience of what it means to be a community, of what it means to engage in culture. And they can't wait for their turn to come and drum and lead the circle or lead the dancing or participate in that act right there, right? And so those are the types of things that I get really, really excited about, because we're doing it for the right now, but we can see the legacy that we can create by reintroducing these practices to our community in that space.
Yeah, and you know what? I was just having this conversation yesterday. The daily grind of getting kids to class. Some kids are late; they're not really taking it serious, and part of. And I'll just use that drumming circle for example, because I've been a part of the one when when Minty did the experience at the farm. But what happens is that the kids get a chance to listen to the wisdom, which creates buy-in, right? Because right now, there are a number of kids are just here because they're supposed to be at school, right? They're not really truly understanding the value of what's happening in the classroom as it prepares them to move up in levels. But they don't have the buy-in. They don't have, you know what I mean? And so an example of the circle, because there's wisdom, being poured out, the spoken word nights that you do, right? The kids go there, and there's always going to be wisdom at these events, just in small talk. And so the more that these kids are exposed, the more they'll make a connection to why class is important. Because currently they just don't, they don't have a rhyme or reason yet, and I think that's awesome, bro. And then also when you think about the things that some of our kids are exposed to, like Friday nights, at a particular house, and the kind of stuff that is going on and the things that they're seeing. So the more opportunity they have to see something positive, and like you say, regrounding, they can come to school in a better space with a purpose. Because of the three cornerstones that you just talked about and how that all ties in. So, what you're doing at the farm is phenomenal, bro, for real.
Thank you, man. I just you reminded me of that drumming circle that we did for the equity experience, man, and I felt like that day, the equity experience, it was moving along, everything was going smooth. And then we all just moved over to the circle. And that was a moment where I felt like the air got taken out of the room.
For real.
Because that's how powerful it was, man. Like, even for the brother that was leading, Brother Kariga, he was leading the circle. I remember the young man came and hit the drum with them. And then some of the things that he said afterwards, or the affirmations that we were saying, like, it was like the air got sucked out of the space and we all got transported to a different mindset and spirituality as like the work that we do as educators is spiritual work.
Right.
It's not rote work. It's not like I'm a mechanic and I just gotta, remove this part and put that part. Nah, this is because we're dealing with the minds and hearts of young people, right? To just minimize education to dealing with their minds is a mistake. And that's why I say the system wasn't created for us, because you're dealing with the mind and the heart. Your student has to be able to come to school and feel so safe, mind, body, and soul, that they willingly give themselves over to the process of learning. And when we think about why students aren't learning, is because we're only trying to connect with the mind. We're not trying to connect with the heart. And so those are the types of things where it's like we're adding layers to what education can and should be, as opposed to stripping those layers back. And we're doing it because it's a calling. When this is a job, look, man, we all want to do bare minimum when it comes to a job. When it comes to doing the dishes, I just want to put the dishes in the dishwasher. I don't want to rinse them off before I put them in the dishwasher. I want to do the bare minimum because I'm not really invested in that work. But when it comes to a calling, when it comes to purpose, oh yeah, we go above and beyond because we understand what the true task requires.
No, absolutely, man. Absolutely. And I just think that, obviously it's business as usual when you run in the school site, especially when you think about budget and all of that. But these types of things are important, which is why like community partnerships are vital, right? So, I could see a scenario where a school is not able to do everything that the farm does, but it could be something that's an opportunity for students at different schools throughout, not even just Sacramento, but throughout, where, they organize a trip where they come out to see you on the weekend, and you have the drumming circles, or they're getting down with the community garden. All that stuff is critical. I remember when I was at John Finney High School, we had a garden, and it wasn't even a big garden, but the kids would work the garden, obviously under the guide of one of our teachers. And you should just see like how proud these kids were when a local church would come and get bags of collard greens for their soup kitchen, right? Like it really also instilled a sense of community, number one, but also a sense of pride, because the kids were like, I did that. Like we did that, And you remember the farm used to come visit it. I mean, the garden used to come visit it.
I definitely do, man. There is a reason why our ancestors did this type of work. It wasn't just about survival. It wasn't just about, oh yeah, we have to grow food. It was about the bonding and the life lessons that you were able to gain when you were in that space, right? I said this to the little homie a couple months back, but when you have to open up and talk to somebody about what's happening in your life, you got a filter that prevents you from opening all the way up, because your mind is completely focused on the conversation. But sometimes when you can have your hands active, my hands is in the soil, my hands are dirty, my hands are active with purpose, it removes that filter, because I have to focus on what my hands are doing. which means that whatever I was holding back is now free to come out. And when you in a space where you can work with community with your hands, you also get in a space where you can start talking about things that's been bothering you, that you're struggling with. And they can respond back to you in kind, because we're working towards another purpose, while I'm also engaging in a healing practice of being like, man, like, you know, because if I'm working with a young person or you working with a young person, one of the things that we're going to say when we get about 10, 15 minutes into work is how things going at home. Right. How you doing in school, right? Now we working, but we're working and talking, man. That's such a different experience than I'm gonna just come in your office and sit here right. and talk to you, right? And so creating those opportunities where everything we do is not work, is mentorship, is teaching, right. It's a lesson to be learned, right? Because when we're out there on the farm, we can stop whatever it is that we're doing and attend to what is pressing for that individual in that moment, as opposed to having to always stick to a pre-prescribed plan.
Well, also what I could see, you know, because I listen to what's heard, but what's being said, but I also listen to what's not being said. And sometimes even when young people come into an office or a classroom, it's adult, child, right? But when you're doing something like working on a garden, it's not, it's not adult, child, right? It's more of like, we're colleagues right now. We're working towards a goal. And that in itself is going to break down the barrier. You know what I mean? Because there's not a hierarchy anymore. We're literally side by side. Or when they come out to the poetry slam, or, that is automatically erased, which is why, like, the approach I have, even when I am in my office, I verbally communicate, like, listen, just speaking to my care for them, number one. So a lot of times they don't really even look at like principal, student, right? They just look at it like more like uncle, right? Somebody that cares about them, because as long as that hierarchy exists, like, kids are going to have the stone wall up for sure, right? But if you can break that down, they're going to open up. And I think that's just a natural way to do that.
That hierarchy is distinctly Western.
Right.
It is not what our ancestors, like, don't get me wrong, there was definitely hierarchy in our communities, ancestral communities, but it was different. You had hierarchies that was based on respect, not based on titles, right? Our hierarchy in Western civilization is based on title. When you obtain a title, you automatically attain some sort of power dynamic over other people. Whereas in our communities, it's always about, like, no, you are bestowed a title. You are bestowed that because people recognize you and your work and your effort and your value to the collective. But the chief is no more valuable than the shaman. It is, we inhabit different roles, but those roles are all equal when it comes to the survival and functioning of our community. And so I agree with you. The more that we can, because, if you take gardening, for example, there is no person that's like, do this, do that. It's, we are going to do this. Right. We are going to go plant. We are going to go water. We are going to, everything that we do together. It's a learning experience. I can't tell you how many times I have had young people out on the farm and they've been like, well, how are we going to do this? And I'm like, I don't know, but we are going to figure it out together. Right. Like, I have no idea how we do this. And then when we figure it out, we take a step back and look at it. And I was like, well, what do you think? I love it. Like, you love it? Yeah. and you get to hear some of their parents be like, man, like, I don't know what you did with my kid. My kid is talking like they've been wanting me to see what y'all did because, and I'm like, yeah, because I didn't know what I was doing. I was the adult. I was in a position of leadership because I earned your child's respect. But I allowed the learning experience to take priority. And so we learned together. And in that process, I learned some things from your kid because your kid was like, let's do it this way.
Right.
All right, let's do it that way. Let's try it out. And so, yeah, man, those are the things that we really are trying to emphasize and utilize this space for, man. It's been a blessing beyond measure to listen to God, to follow his word in terms of this is how he wants my career to begin progressing. It's not do this instead of what you have been doing. It's do this in addition to what you have been doing, right? Which is that's the elevation that I speak to. And so, man, it's been a ball. It's been a tremendous blast as we do this work.
And I'll say this, I know we're running pretty close to the time, but as I was listening to you describe like your work in that garden, right? And I hope that folks out there can just take this one example and then transform it into the classroom in whatever creative way you can. Because as a leader, you know, I don't try to dictate how it's done. Like, I want people to be fully creative, but there are certain things that have to happen. So just in that small example, first thing, just putting yourself on obviously the leader, but still putting yourself on the same level, right? So you're working together. Sometimes you won't have all the answers. Let me ask you. What that's communicating is that number one is collaborative, right? It's communicating value to that young person. And then in the process of working, and the farm in itself is another example, but you're investing. And when it's genuine and the kids see you investing into them, I remember being in the 5th grade and my 5th grade teacher, Miss Doster, investing into me, lifting me up. I still remember how it felt, right? It motivated me, right? It made me feel good, of course, but it motivated me to want to do better. So we have to invest, and that's what you're doing just with the farm in general. But in that time in the garden, you were investing knowledge, you were investing, experience. And then the third thing, going back to your cornerstone, the kids then took on ownership. That's why they were so proud of it. And I think that we miss that in school. Like, when I go into a classroom and it's not as well kept as it needs to be, I know immediately the kids don't have ownership over that classroom. And then I go into another classroom and it is spotless without the custodian. The kids have ownership over the classroom. So that's why I think your 3 cornerstones were so, instrumental, because if you can get those 3 things, that could apply. You can move it anywhere. You know what I mean? You just have to keep that concept right there.
Let me also say this, man, because I know we're going to have to wrap it up pretty soon, man, but you told me this and I've never forgot it. You talked to me about planting seeds and building forests, right?
Yeah.
And I think we all have to understand that a little bit better. To me, that's what we're doing with the farm. Is we want to plant a seed in every youth and every family that comes.
That's right.
It would be awesome if we can see that youth or that family repeatedly, so we can see how that seed develops. But we know that if we create the right kind of environment and space, right, and we plant that seed, that somewhere out there in this world, there's a forest that is growing.
That's right. And, we also have to be okay. So the quote was kind of getting to, for a tree or forest whose shade, that you may never sit under. And as educators, that's what we're doing. Like, we're planting these seeds, growing these trees. Some of the trees will be able to utilize the shades. Others we won't. Doesn't matter. We just have to plant. Bring it right back to the farm, man, where you're planting fruit trees and, potatoes and, all that, man. So I think that's about our time, IJ, man. I appreciate you. I know you super busy. You probably got to go plow an acre or something like that. You know, so I appreciate you getting off the horse, man, and spending some time with your folkers, man.
Hey man, I appreciate you too, man. It's good. Like I said, it's good to see you, man. This has been a wonderful conversation, honestly, truly.
You know, we ball out every time we're in each other's presence, man. So, all right, viewers out there, we want to thank you for tapping in on behalf of Mentee Educational Services. We truly appreciate you. You know, once this hits YouTube, you know, we want you to share this with all your friends. I mean, like I said earlier, you know, Dr. IJ dropped some lava on y'all, man. So, you know, it was hot. So with that being said, shout out to Dr. Q. We appreciate you also. With that being said, we're out of here like last year, y'all. Hey, be smooth, happy holidays, all that.